ever popped a gummy or enjoyed a vape cartridge and wondered, like, how do they make sure this is actually safe? I mean, we've all heard the horror stories about, contaminated produce.
Right.
But what about cannabis?
Yeah.
How do we know what we're consuming is clean?
That's where the fascinating world of pesticide testing comes in.
Okay.
And let me tell you, it's a lot more involved than just like sniffing out a bad batch.
Right.
We're talking about highly specialized labs, meticulous procedures, and some seriously impressive technology.
And that's precisely what we're diving into today, a deep dive into the world of cannabis pesticide testing.
Okay.
We've got our hands on an actual standard operating procedure, or SOP, from a certified lab,
Right.
which outlines the step-by-step process for analyzing cannabis for these unwanted extras.
Think of this SOP as the rule book for ensuring accurate and reliable pesticide test results.
Okay.
It's the gold standard that helps guarantee what you're consuming is safe.
Okay, so this document, Pesticide SOP, August 16th, 2024, OMA, specifically focuses on something called liquid chromatography mass spectrometry, or LCMS.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not a scientist, but that sounds pretty high-tech.
It is. Imagine a microscopic detective meticulously separating and identifying every single chemical compound in your cannabis sample.
Wow.
That's essentially what LCMS does, like a superpowered microscope that can detect even the tiniest traces of pesticides.
And that level of precision is important because
even tiny amounts of certain pesticides, if consumed over time, can pose serious health risks.
Right.
This isn't just about a headache. We're talking about potentially long-term issues. And in the tightly regulated world of cannabis, accurate testing is non-negotiable.
Of course.
Both for consumer safety and legal compliance.
Right.
This particular SOP zeroes in on 13 key pesticides.
13.
Yeah.
So that begs the question, are there others?
Yeah.
Why these specific 13?
Great question.
Yeah.
These 13 are some of the most common and potentially harmful pesticides that could end up in cannabis.
Okay.
But you're right, it highlights a crucial point.
Okay.
Without a single nationwide standard in the U.S., the types of pesticides tested can vary from state to state.
That's a bit concerning.
Yeah.
So while this SOP gives us an inside look at the meticulous process,
Right.
it also kind of reveals a gap in the system.
Exactly. It underscores the need for more comprehensive, standardized regulations across the board to ensure consumer safety no matter where you are or what you're buying.
Good to know, but also slightly terrifying.
Yeah.
Okay, back to this SOP.
Sure.
I'm noticing a lot of technical terms and acronyms.
Yeah.
Like, what exactly is LCMS grade ACN? Sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie.
It's not as complicated as it sounds.
Okay.
Think of it as the purest form of a common solvent used in chemistry.
Okay.
It's like using filtered water for a delicate recipe instead of water straight from the tap.
Right.
You want to ensure there are no impurities that could mess up the final product, or in this case, the test results.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So they've got their super pure ingredients, but what about the tools?
Yeah.
I'm looking at a list here that includes a mega shake sample shaker and something about steel BBs.
Yeah.
Sounds more like a heavy metal concert than a lab.
Well, analyzing cannabis isn't always as simple as testing a plant leaf.
Right.
Imagine trying to test a gummy bear.
Yeah.
You need a way to break down that chewy mess into something a machine can analyze.
Right.
That's where the Mega Shake and those steel BBs come in.
Okay.
They're the heavy-duty tools for homogenizing samples,
Right.
ensuring consistent and accurate testing no matter the form your cannabis comes in.
Okay, so we've got our super pure ingredients in our heavy-duty equipment.
Right.
But how do they actually ensure these tests are accurate?
Yeah.
It can't just be a matter of tossing everything into the Mega Shake and hoping for the best.
Right. You're right. There's a lot more to it than that. It all comes down to meticulous calibration and quality control. Think of it as making sure your measuring cups and scales are accurate before you start baking a cake.
So no dumping random handfuls of flour into the mix.
Exactly.
Got it.
In this case, they use carefully prepared solutions called calibration standards
Okay.
to make sure the instruments are measuring everything correctly.
Right.
And this is where things get even more interesting
Okay.
with the concept of matrix-matched calibration.
Okay. Matrix match. That sounds like something Neo would encounter in the Matrix.
You're not too far off. It basically means they tailor the calibration process to the specific type of cannabis product being tested.
Okay.
So if they're testing a flower sample,
Right.
they use a blank flower matrix.
Okay.
If it's a tincture,
Right.
they use a blank tincture matrix.
Because testing a gummy bear is a whole different ballgame than testing a vape cartridge.
Precisely.
Okay.
They have to account for the unique properties of each cannabis product to ensure accurate and reliable results across the board.
Right.
It's all about eliminating variables and ensuring consistency.
This might be where my brain starts to melt a little.
Sure.
But the document also mentions different types of blanks.
Yeah.
Like reagent blank and matrix blank.
Uh-huh.
Are we talking about literally empty test tubes here?
Okay.
What's the point of a blank if it's blank?
I get why that sounds confusing.
Yeah.
But these blanks are anything but empty.
Okay.
They're more like the control group in an experiment.
Okay.
They contain everything except the actual cannabis sample, allowing the analysts to pinpoint any background noise or potential contamination.
So it's like running a test on the equipment itself to make sure it's not giving false readings.
Exactly. Think of it this way. You wouldn't want a dirty test tube
Right.
or a contaminated solvent
Right.
to skew the results and make it look like your cannabis sample has pesticides when it doesn't.
Yeah.
These blanks are all about ensuring a clean slate for accurate analysis.
Garbage in, garbage out. They're making sure there's no garbage sneaking into the results.
Right.
Okay, so we've got the equipment, the pure ingredients, the calibrated instruments, and the contamination checks.
Mm-hmm.
What else makes this chemical symphony sing?
Now we're getting to the conductor of this symphony.
Okay.
The internal standard.
Right, internal standard preparation. I saw that section, but will admit I did a bit of skimming. Too many big words for me.
Don't worry, it's a concept that trips a lot of people up.
Right.
Imagine adding a tiny, carefully measured drop of food coloring to both your cake batter and a separate glass of water.
Okay.
The coloring acts as a reference point.
Okay.
Even if you pour the batter into different sized pans, you can still compare the color intensity to the water.
Right.
And know if you've got the proportions right.
So it's like a built-in measuring stick for the analysis.
Exactly.
Okay.
The internal standard is like that drop of food coloring.
Gotcha.
It's a chemically similar but harmless compound added to both the calibration standards and the cannabis samples.
Okay.
By comparing how these internal standards behave during the analysis,
Right.
scientists can accurately measure the concentration of the real pesticides.
So they're not just looking for the presence of a pesticide.
Right.
But figuring out exactly how much is in there.
Precisely. It's about quantifying the results.
Right.
Not just qualifying them.
Right.
And that level of detail is crucial when dealing with something as sensitive as potential contaminants.
Now, even with all this high-tech equipment and meticulous procedures, things can still go wrong, right?
Of course.
Which is probably why this SOP has a whole section dedicated to instrument maintenance.
Absolutely. Even the most sophisticated instruments need regular TLC.
Right.
Think of it like taking your car in for a tune-up.
Yeah.
It's not just about keeping things clean,
Right.
though a tidy lab is always a good thing.
Yeah.
It's about ensuring the instruments continue to perform at their best and deliver accurate, reliable results.
Who knew there was so much happening behind the scenes to ensure the cannabis we buy is safe?
It's a whole world most people never even think about, but it's fascinating once you start to peel back the layers.
Right.
And what's really cool is that this SOP gives us a glimpse into that world.
Yeah.
The precision, the technology, the commitment to accuracy.
It's like we all want a clean buzz.
Right.
But this SOP shows us just how much goes into making that happen. It's not magic. It's science.
It is.
But earlier you mentioned a lack of a single federal standard for pesticide testing in cannabis. Does that mean consumers are kind of on their own when it comes to safety?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right.
And it's something consumers should be aware of.
Right.
Right now, it's a patchwork of state regulations.
Yeah.
Which means the stringency of testing and even the pesticides they look for can vary widely.
So what can listeners do? Should we be, demanding to see lab reports alongside our gummies?
It's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
Getting familiar with your state's regulations is a good first step.
Right.
And don't be afraid to ask questions at the dispensary.
Right.
Reputable businesses will be transparent about their sourcing and testing procedures.
Transparency is key.
Absolutely.
Knowing where your cannabis comes from and how it's tested can go a long way in ensuring a positive and safe experience. This has been incredibly eye-opening. Any final thoughts for our listeners before we wrap up this deep dive?
I think the biggest takeaway here is that even though cannabis is becoming more mainstream,
Right.
it's still an industry finding its footing,
Right.
especially when it comes to regulation.
Right.
So be informed, be curious, and don't hesitate to ask questions.
Ask those questions, read those labels, and keep those mega shakes happy. That's a wrap on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious, friends.